Okay, guys, welcome back. Yesterday, we talked about getting your school ready for inspection. We talked about the importance of self-evaluation and on how long that process can take to do properly. We talked about the importance of getting your safeguarding and your health and safety right. And we took you through the achievement and personal development criteria. We also reminded you that this whole process is to help you do the best for your pupils and that their safety and development is what's at the heart of the process. One thing I should have added yesterday is the fact that Paul and I gave a few opinions, and any that we do give during these sessions are from Paul and me. They're not the official view of the DFE nor ISI. And although we've been commissioned by ISI to do inspections in the past, we're not their official representatives nor their employees. So please don't quote us back at them at any stage saying, oh, Paul and Robert said this. It'll go down so well. Now, we want to see how well you've taken on board the things we discussed yesterday. And in the chat, I've just posted a link which will take you to a quick questionnaire. Alternatively, you can use your phone, and I've put a QR code up there for you now, which you can scan with your phone. An iPhone in normal camera mode, I'll pick that up. And we want you to have a go just for 2 minutes answering the questions that you can see then on screen, and then we'll come back and review your answers. So either click on the link in the chat or scan the code on the screen, and we'll be back in 2 minutes. Is that working for everyone? Yeah, I've got some responses coming in now. That's great. For those of you who've just arrived, you'll see a QR code on screen. There's also a link in the chat section for a quick questionnaire to review your learning from yesterday. So if you want to catch up and have a little go at that for us, please. The link should be in the chat. I'll put. We'll just give that a couple more seconds. Average completion time is about 1.5 minutes. So I think some of you are already done. I'll slide that into view.
Okay, shall I go through the answers then, Robert?
Take us through some of those answers, yes.
Okay, so the educational quality inspection is something which takes place routinely every 6 years, but please remember that it could be at any time that you're inspected, but the program is a 6-yearly educational quality inspection. And remember that some of the compliance inspection, the regulatory compliance, will come in the 3 years in between. The reasons for ISI coming to inspect is either can be a special request by the DFE, or a monitoring visit following for a progress review. It is not about the fact that they happen to be in your area. I mean, sometimes people say, oh, X schools had it, we're going to be done now because they're all in the area. It doesn't work like that. And it's definitely not because they haven't got enough work. I know for a fact. Number 3, the only 2 things that you need on your website are the safeguarding policy and a copy of your previous inspection report. And number 4, not routinely spotlighted in focus compliance inspection is the curriculum, although that can be a contributory factor and mentioned. So which of the following are not routinely is in a focus compliance is the curriculum. And an EQI, the pupil achievement and pupil development are the key focuses, and the teaching is something which would only ever be a contributory factor towards the outcomes of the pupils in those 2 areas. And number 6, all of those groups of pupils will be mentioned on your final inspection report. All of those groups are important, and we keep saying, I think yesterday, and we'll say it again today, please bear in mind every one of your pupils is important, that they're making good progress and that their outcomes are excellent. It matters not really how outstanding the RS lessons are as to whether you would, on spiritual understanding, get a really good outcome at inspection, because there are many other ways of showing spiritual understanding. It's anything to do with the non-material world. And finally, number 8, 10 laptops, iPads per class to secure a high grade, and I think you probably got this quite well from yesterday, is false. It's not relevant. It's not about provision. It's about the one computer in the whole of a school that you've got being massively well used. It's the outcomes from the IT that's the focus. The provision of that equipment might be a contributory factor, but it's certainly not a focus for the inspection. Okay,
Thank
Robert?
you. Yeah, thank you very much indeed. I hope that's helpful. Well done. Most of you got most of those right. Some of the ones that were a bit wrong were just us messing about earlier to make sure it worked. So good response there, class. Well done. Now, this whole process of getting prepared is a constant process of what we call gap analysis. You have to keep reviewing whether you are where you want to be, and you have to keep it bubbling away in the background alongside all the other daily demands of running your school. And under certain circumstances, current circumstances, we know that can be a bit of an issue. Now, some of the boxes on the CEF ask you to grade yourself. So how will you know what grade to realistically give yourself? Well, we're going to spend a few minutes on the official grade descriptors next. These are on the ISI website and are used by inspectors to help them evaluate their evidence. And you need to understand them to help you develop your school. Hopefully, you managed to secure a copy of those grade descriptors today or yesterday and successfully checked your ISI site logon. I don't know whether you've got the logon for that or one of your colleagues did, but you need to make sure you've got access to it somewhere. And if you're not working at an ISC association school, as I said in the email, I'm sorry we can't pass on the official documentation, and I apologise if that puts you at a slight disadvantage for the moment. That is beyond our scope. So the first thing to note when you look at the grade descriptors is the official disclaimer at the top. These are best fit judgment. They're not absolute judgments. You don't have to tick every single box. And as with old-fashioned exam marking, you can get a grade A whether you got 99% or whether you get 71%. The same's true with schools working at this kind of level in inspection. Some will show a more complete coverage or have more evidence to show than others, but you can still be excellent if your school has the right attitudes, shows pupils who are happy and making good progress in their learning and development, and are working in a safe environment. Likewise, you might have a number of these criteria really well covered, but be weaker in others. And if there's a doubt in the inspection team's mind, you could be graded lower. So please note, it's a best fit exercise. Now, if you have it with you, will you have a look at the excellent grade descriptor for achievement? And as you read through, you can see the various criteria we mentioned yesterday. There's a statement about aims. We spent a bit of time on that, didn't we? There's reference to areas of learning across the subject range. There's reference to assessments. There's attitudes and study skills, and a note about SEND and EAL. And the other grades all say similar things as well, but you'll notice that they use subtly different adjectives. Now, this is a demanding set of criteria, rightly so. And it's only by doing the background work we talked about yesterday that you'll know whether your school meets all these. So our next activity this morning is actually asking you to go through the grade descriptors for excellent achievement. Use a pen or your highlighters if you brought them to isolate which sentences relate to which of the 8 achievement aspects. I'm going to give you 5 minutes on that. If you finish early, by all means, have a go at the development criteria in the same way, because this is going to help you with your CEF later. If you understand which bits of the grade descriptors go with which bits of the achievement criteria, then you can really start to drill down and recognise your own school. So have a go at that for 5 minutes if you won't mind.
Okay, hopefully you've begun to realise that the A1 to A8 criteria, what's found in the evidence and what the inspectors choose to put as their sort of final commentary, all puts together like a jigsaw. And of course, if we were writing, myself or Robert were writing any of these reports and we didn't cover all of the A1 to A8 in our final report, we'd get it back from the editor straight away. So all those 8 bits get woven into one piece of continuous prose, which reflects the school at that excellent stage. So hopefully that was a good exercise for you to do. I've done it myself in SLT meetings. I've done it in academic or pastoral leaders meetings when we've sat down and got them to rag red, amber, green, the various sections of the grade descriptors for them to look at. What do you think we're doing really well in terms of achievement? What do we think we're doing really well in terms of personal development? And that's a really good test to see how they judge their own area of responsibility. The other way, actually, and get a broader view, is to ask the pastoral academic leaders to judge the other area of school life. So if you've got academic leaders, it's a really good thing to give them the pastoral, personal development area and see what they come to. But always ask them, please, when they're ragging, if they can note the examples they're basing their judgment on. So if it's green, what is it that they've seen or heard which actually makes them come to that judgment? And also it's worth, if you're doing the exercise, reminding them what's causing that to happen, what caused that particular outcome to be the case, because it gets them to realise again how the framework works. So from all these activities, it can be a good foundation as well to further refine school development planning by getting your leaders to share in that, and also to enhance your school evaluation form, your CEF as well. So I can't recommend that exercise too highly enough as a point in time to get a feel for the school from different viewpoints. And it's a very good piece of collaborative work as well when they discuss their reasons for allocating the particular grades. Are there any questions about grade descriptors at all? I think they are. I just remind you to read, sometimes look at the excellent and read the good and see the comparator between the two, the difference between the two, I think is a useful thing as well.
If I may, Paul, one question that I often get asked is, will people penalise themselves if in their CEF they put a good grade? If they like to be excellent, but they've put good, will that penalise them? And I think the answer is no. The inspectors will want to see that you've been serious about what you've done and you can back it up. And I have inspected in schools, been on teams where actually the fact that the school has been conservative and been sensible has actually counted for them. And they've been given excellence anyway, because it was a very robust piece of work. It's simply that the school's own expectations were slightly high. So as long as you don't try and bluff your way through it and put excellent when you're not, because that actually is, that's the opposite. That can be a bit of a challenge to the inspection team. Yeah. If they think they're if they think they're excellent, are they really? So don't be afraid to put good if that's what you're finding at the moment, and obviously use that as a stimulus and a springboard to work behind the scenes in the time you've got left to bridge that gap and try and get yourself up to excellence. But if you believe you're good and you put good, that doesn't penalise you. Would you agree?
I would agree totally with that, and I think the overestimation causes more consternation, underestimation, and a realistic journey which can be described by the head or the senior leaders all adds to a cohesive, comprehensive, and I've been on similar inspections where it actually tips them upwards because they're on a journey and you give the benefit really through to that. Okay, thank you. So another area where you can prepare in advance are developing some words to summarise your school. If you have a previous inspection report, this is the bit at the front which outlines your phone number, postcode, email contacts, current number of pupils on roll, broken down by gender and age group. There's also the pre-say of your school, its history and cohort, and its aims. Now, the inspector, the reporting inspector, will ask you to provide some words on day one. Therefore, as we tried to say to you yesterday, having something ready in hand, in a drawer, in a filing system, is another thing that can save you time and stress during your inspection visit. But however, please note, we don't want a thesis on the history of the school. The inspection team, the reporting inspector will have a very strict word count and may have to adapt what you provide to fit in. You can find all of the relevant information that's required in a document 3.2. It's called pre-inspection information, and much of it stays the same year in, year out. But there are things such as the number of pupils, and what I found very useful was to do this in January after the DFE census has been done, and certainly in a secondary setting, particularly when all the exam remarks, upgrades were known. So I used to sort of do that update of the pre-inspection information with a colleague who did all the numbers and the Sims stuff in January. End of January was always the time we sat down and did that. But much of the pre-inspection information stays the same, but it's important because it gives the reporting inspector the words to start the inspection report. So hopefully by now you've got all the required documentation up to date and in the right place. You'll have analysed and evaluated your school. You know it really well inside and out. And you'll also be improving any areas that you feel you can be improved, and you know clearly where you are on that journey. Meanwhile, there's been a flurry of activity behind the scenes, unbeknown to you, at ISI headquarters.
Absolutely. The EQI visits begin long before you're contacted. Inspection teams are built months in advance, and around 6 to 8 weeks before your visit, your RI will already be scrutinising your website to ascertain the culture of your school and the aims that your school works towards. As we said earlier, part of the framework requires the inspection to make a judgment about how well the school is meeting its aims for all pupils. And the reporting inspector will also be checking that key policies and other information such as safeguarding is published as required for your parents. And the RI will also download all the information from the ISI portals. Now, because you've already worked through the document we looked at yesterday and you've got everything green in good time, you've got no worries, of course, because your part of the portal is well populated with all the information we showed you yesterday. So many schools place themselves at a disadvantage by not keeping up-to-date information posted on that portal. You should have your key policies, your assessment results, and so on there as discussed yesterday. Now, as an RI, if I can read these policies in my own time at home without stress, I can do a much better job of evaluating them for you. If I don't get your documentation until I telephone you at the start of the visit, that quickens my heart rate a little, and it will do the same to your leadership team. And immediately makes me wonder whether your school is actually inspection ready. So upload your information now. As soon as we finish today, get something up there. As the actual inspection approaches, the RI will brief their team and share that key information you've supplied with them. So it's really important they've got access to it in good time. Okay. Paul, when we were at Leeds, you had a particular system to make some information available to the inspectors. Do you want to talk us through what you did there?
Yeah, I think it was using a shared area to upload all those various places, and it enabled me. I sort of oversaw all of it to keep an eye on the various documentation over time. But I think how you set that up and how manages it, the shared area and the links to the ISI portal, as well as the uploads to the external websites, you have to think carefully who is responsible for that. And I think we mentioned yesterday that it probably falls to a part of the job description, a key responsibility, which everybody knows. Sometimes you get the situation where everybody's trying to meddle, and I don't think that's particularly useful. So you have to ask the question of the person or the people that you're going to give that responsibility to. Do they have the IT skills for it? What level of responsibility or authority do they have in the school? Think about who it is that makes sure that the nudges to the people responsible for policies are taking place. So I used to do that myself. I used to have a list of who I was going to nudge if the policy was due to expire within 3 months. They would get an email and then they get another one until it was all sorted. You also need to have the same nudge on the CEF, and that probably is down to the head of the school should be looking at that CEF, I would have thought. But again, somebody might need to nudge the head, who knows. And also the pre-inspection evidence, as we just mentioned, the pre-inspection information, is another document which it serves itself to be up to date and ready to go. So when you set up a shared area, you need to have clear lines of responsibility for the various parts. You need to be clear who's got the overview. It turns out this job is a real big picture in one way and then fine details in another way, and some of the work is delegated, so you have to make sure it's managed very, very tightly. The other thing I found through bitter experience was giving people write access or read access. If you give too many people write access to too many documents, you suddenly find stuff which had been uploaded is being amended. And that's massively not helpful. Yet you do want people to have read access to the documents, and you need to understand when and who. So who do you want read access to give read access to, and when do you want them to have it? If a document's in its sort of development stage, you wouldn't want them to read it. But when it's finished and ready for inspection purposes, you would want a population to read it. Is it all your staff? Is it just your leadership team? Who is actually going to be reading it? But I would definitely caution about who you give write access to in terms of the shared area and the various parts of it. We used to keep all of the information, literally called it an RI folder. So stuff for the RI was always a link copied into there. So as soon as we knew that the RI was in touch with us, we could literally move stuff across, the original documentation goes across, and we could send that straight away. I do think that whole system bears some thought and some close scrutiny and very tight management of who's doing what, and everybody should know who's doing what. I also, the final thing really on this, on that shared area would be the parent copies, if you will, of all the policies that were then going to be put onto the external site or into the various places where they ended up. I found, again, through experience, the power of keeping the previous copies. So historic copies of policies should be stored, I think, somewhere else. And it's not for the inspection purposes, but it is very much, if you get historic questions about 2 years ago, X happened, if you have a copy of that policy, it's really useful to be able to put the context behind those concerns or complaints that people might have. So that's not an inspection hint, it's just saying sometimes it's really good to keep the historic documentation of policies so that you can refer back to the context if anything comes up from the past. Robert?
Thank you. Now, the first you'll know of the inspection is a phone call from the ISI, followed quickly by one from your RI. Now, this call is vital in securing the best inspection, and a senior leader, ideally the head, must be available for about an hour in the morning and then again for a shorter time in the afternoon. Ensure that your PA knows who to pass the phone call to if you're not available, and ensure that whoever is taking the call has access to that key information file we've just described. Now, contact between the RI and the school are particularly important in establishing a good working relationship, in setting the tone and style for the whole inspection process. And they also provide a useful first insight into the nature of the school for the team, and an opportunity to confirm that the school has provided all the necessary documentation. Again, if you know what to expect now, you'll look much more organised, and it will remove some of the stress for your team, knowing that you have everything covered. We're working on the principle that if you're well organised and you have undertaken some good work in devising and updating your CEF, and you're not under the additional stress of finding things at the last minute, then you're going to perform better when under the inspection spotlight. Thus, it's going to make it easier for you to secure that excellent grade. Now, be open and professional on these phone calls. Don't try to hide things. Sometimes the inspectors will know about things you aren't expecting. Occasionally we get background information from the DFE or from social services, and it really makes you look bad if you try and hide things. if you have had a significant issue recently, be ready to show us the file about how you dealt with it, whether that's a safeguarding issue, a big parental complaint, or whatever. You know, if you've done the proper paperwork properly behind the scenes and you're confident in how you dealt with it, be ready to show us that.
So the reporting inspector during this phone call will have done some of the pre-work before they make the call, but they will be seeking to understand more clearly the character of your school, and it's a valuable opportunity for the school to draw attention to any important features and circumstances of which the inspection team should be aware. For example, you can have parents' evenings or examinations running during that period of time for the inspection. There might be key absences of key staff. There could be some illnesses which are running at the moment. The reporting inspector should also raise with the school any areas for concern in relation to the regulatory matters already considered as part of their analysis of documentation before the inspection, so from their pre-reading. This provides an opportunity for the school, who may provide additional information and/or make improvements where necessary and where possible. However, it must be made clear that only one further submission for improved or updated policies can be considered during the inspection, and they have to be submitted to the reporting inspector on the first day. And whilst inspectors will seek to help schools understanding their regulatory duties, the final responsibility for achieving compliance on regulations rests wholly with the school. An important focus will be that the RI will discuss arrangements made by the school for distributing the questionnaire codes to pupils, staff, and to parents. Immediately following the phone call notifying a school of the RCI or EQI inspection, the ISI office sends an email to the school with clear instructions for enabling pupils, parents, and staff to complete the confidential online questionnaire. As part of general readiness for inspections, schools should ensure that they are able to issue the instructions by email to all parents no later than 2 hours after notification. This very much is to enable as many parents as possible to have the opportunity to complete the questionnaire before the deadline. It might be perhaps useful to think of the pace that a complaining parent reacts and responds in cases in school. They'll be the first ones to complete the questionnaire. But also think about the time for a generally satisfied parent to make any comment. Well, in my experience, sometimes they don't, they're just fine. So in order to get as many of the latter parents, those who are generally satisfied, getting the questionnaire out as soon as possible helps just to get a better balance and a better representation of the parental view. The reporting inspector will ask about the proposed team base. And again, please give some thought in good time, well in advance, without the pressure of having just spoken to the RI. So I would say you should know in your own mind within the next few days, where would your team base be and why would it be there? The room has got to be large enough for the inspection team and the laptops and stationery and a printer and its Wi-Fi range. Think about the security of the room. The inspection team would expect that it could be easily locked and everybody should have access in the inspection team to that, the keys or cards. Accessibility to the main activities for inspection. Don't put them in the cricket pavilion down the drive. I think that would be foolish. You're expected to gather together pupils' work for scrutiny. Where are you going to put that? And these are all, again, questions that you can answer in the next 2 days and already have solutions. And people will know as soon as the call comes, you're straight onto it. The work scrutiny is going to be in this room. You could say if the team base is large, that'll be an okay place for it, or you can have a separate room. Again, think about security and accessibility. It would be best nearer the inspection team base. Think about, is your timetable completely up to date? What you set out in September, has it had some major changes? If it has, you will need to notify the RI because they may be working off the copy of the timetable on the portal, which is September's, not January's. Have you uploaded a current extracurricular timetable? If you haven't, that's not a problem, but do have the current one up and ready. I've seen it sensibly posted in the inspector room prior to the inspection starting, as well as it going online. Think about which venues you would choose for staff or pupil interviews. And again, think about logistics on there. Try and think about the calm, familiar place is often a good spot. Putting them all together probably helps as well. So having the rooms quite close to each other, so the inspection team will arrive and the children will know where to go, the staff will know where to go. You have ready access to your chair of governors or the vice chair. Are they aware that if the inspection call comes, the chair, and in their absence the vice chair, should be available? And I've known that be done via Zoom as well, but they need to be available at some point in the inspection, and often that will come quite early on in the inspection, but they do need to know that at short notice they will be called upon to have an interview, most usually with the reporting inspector. Where will you accommodate the inspector's cars? And again, it is just a seamless sort of, it makes it easy as a team inspector, reporting inspector, if you arrive and the car park bays have been allocated right next to the entry to the school. So you're not getting wet when you carry your great big bags, and it just makes a difference. You feel as though the school's ready for you. And again, who checks them in and who greets them? You could have all of this all sorted well in advance of the inspection phone call. And just a reminder, remember what checks you're going to do on the inspectors, which will be, he says, crossing his fingers, the very same checks and information given that you do to any guest that comes in. How will you keep their coffee and tea supplies topped up? And I have to tell you that whilst it's very nice to get good catering, it doesn't influence the notion of an excellent grade.
And it does. Don't tell them that. Yes, it does. Good cakes equals good grade.
I've known schools that come out excellent and give you just literally a machine coffee and a biscuit, job done. And I've known schools that really give you lots of cakes and goodies all the way through, and they regrettably don't come anywhere near the excellent grade. But it is important to keep that going, and understanding that the inspector team base is a confidential, secure area. So who will be assigned the role of taking in and refreshing those catering supplies? And again, think about it ahead of time, because if the inspection phone call comes, you have so many other things to do. All those plans that I would recommend you have in advance should be easily accessed in a ready, rapid reaction file, and keep that file with your PA or on your SLT shared area so everybody knows where it is. So as soon as the call comes, you can literally enact all of those things. And it was something I would probably look at on an annual basis, just to check that the personnel are the same personnel and the places are the same places, and just be comfortable in your own mind. Yeah, we checked that in September. If they come anytime this year, this is what we're going to do. I think the other thing I would tell you from my experience is, and this is, who's going to be the runner for the inspection. So schools will usually appoint a runner, and I've done it 3 times now. It should not be the head. If you can avoid it being the head, I would make sure it's not the head. But a deputy would be a good allocated person to do it. And you need to get the right person to establish the right relationships. I've been in schools where it's not been the right person, and it makes it quite difficult. And others where it's you just know exactly why they've chosen that person to be essentially the runner between the inspection team and the school. But I would, if you can avoid it being the head, I think I would recommend that you do that. Robert, would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. I'd also reiterate the point you made earlier about timetables and so on. I think I've been on inspections where I've been given a timetable. I've allocated the team to all the different lessons they've got to go and observe, and the assemblies and the form periods and all those sort of things. And then you get there and it says Year 7 English on the timetable, and you get there and it's actually Year 8 Geography. But you've already seen Year 8, so you don't want to see them. So suddenly you've got to start scrabbling around to find someone else to go and see. And when I've got to write a report in 36 hours time, or whatever it is, 18 hours time, and I'm already feeling a little bit of stress myself, I want things smooth. And the more smooth you can make it and have all these things ready in the background, the whole thing just glides through. Everyone's at their ease. You are, the team are, and it makes the whole process so much more efficient and beneficial for everyone.
I think I would state really strongly here this next piece. Again, please be aware that most of what we've just talked about is not in and of itself going to lead to an excellent inspection. Nothing that we've mentioned relates directly to outcomes for pupils or regulations or pupil achievement or personal development. However, as we stated yesterday, and Robert's just said it again, I'll say it again, the more organised you are ahead of time, the more you and your staff can take up a more sort of relaxed yet focused approach around making the best use of your time during inspection, perhaps supporting and guiding the inspectors towards some really interesting areas, as well as perhaps providing a better contextual understanding of the school to the team. But just a caveat, do not get in the way of the inspection team. It's, you know, don't let them do their stuff. If they need you, you need to be there responsive and with them and answering their questions. And that's around that, the runner, who's going to be the runner and who's going to facilitate it. But if the school and the pupils and the staff are in a relaxed yet focused approach in their minds, because everything's sorted, I think it will help you show your school at its very best. If you're running around like headless chickens, I don't think that does anybody any favours, yourselves, the students, nor the inspection team. Is there anything that anybody would like clarifying on that section? I think it's important. Much of it doesn't lead to excellence in its own right, but it does create the environment in which excellent grades can appear more easily.
I'll move on then. I'll move on. So all too soon, the big day will arrive. The initial team that you'll receive on day one usually comprises a reporting inspector and a compliance team inspector, a CTI and an RI, although some schools, for example those on split sites, may have a larger team. If you've got a school with EYFS or boarding provision, then additional specialist inspectors are also included in the team. And there's particular compliance feedback at the end of the process, of course. Now, depending on the fall of bank holidays and so on, you generally expect to see the inspection team arrive on a Tuesday, and much of that day would be spent on regulatory issues such as the SCR and safeguarding. For an educational quality inspection, the additional team members will arrive on the morning of day 2, usually the Wednesday, and be assigned to things like assemblies, registration times, and lessons immediately. You'll get the regulatory part of the feedback usually by lunchtime on that day, and the educational quality feedback on the afternoon of day 3, normally the Thursday. Now, these days can change under circumstances, but the odds are in favour of those days being the key ones. Now, in terms of this organisation, knowing that, be smart. Look at your timetables and your clubs for Wednesdays and Thursday mornings. Can you spot any potential embarrassments or issues? So one school, for example, I went to had games for everyone on a Wednesday afternoon, and so didn't run any additional clubs on the lunchtime. Consequently, the lunch queue was huge, unwieldy, slightly riotous, and a major source of irritation for the staff and ill discipline for the pupils. Now, are there any unmissable activities that you would wish the team to definitely see? Think and plan ahead to minimise anything that would make you look less than excellent, but also to make sure you can point people, the team, towards any activities that are really worth seeing. And inspectors will glean pastoral and pupil development information from form times and assemblies. And again, do you have a programme to show how all this fits together? Will they see social, moral, spiritual and cultural development? Will anything show up contrary to fundamental British values? Do the pupils have jobs and responsibilities? Are they happy? And what's the behaviour like? And we touched on some of this yesterday, didn't we? Don't underestimate what's gathered by the team, not in formal settings, but literally just walking down the corridors, lunch with the children and other informal sources. Let me give you an example of that now. Paul, back to you.
Oh, thank you. On inspect, it's always hardest to gather evidence on pupil development. I think that's just a matter of course, because that's how it is. Inspectors fully understand that it can be harder to see in, let's say, an IT lesson, but not impossible, than it is to say in a school council meeting. And basically, if inspectors can't see it, they can use other information, but if there's limited or no evidence, a team cannot grade an aspect highly. So therefore, ensure that you can point inspectors to possible sources in order to help them triangulate and create the strongest and most valid evidence base from which to reach a team judgment. And again, part of the discussions between the reporting inspector and the head will be around, perhaps, if you haven't set it up properly, have we got a bit more of information on this? Can you show me some of that? And that's, again, the power of having a good runner and the head's relationship with the reporting inspector. There could be a special assembly which might be really useful, which is on that week, or photographs of a previous charity event. Be aware and start thinking about that now. Note any special sources of information in your CEF so you cross-reference it, and it enables you not to forget those little gems which will make a difference. The inspection team will visit lessons and look at pupil work. What will they find? Well, we would hope by now you've got the idea that you know what they're going to find, because you're all over it in evaluating your school and formulating your self-evaluation form. How are the standards that you see in classrooms compared to age expectations and ability profile? And hopefully, again, your observations and scrutinies of work undertaken routinely will have revealed any areas for improvement, and you will know where you are on that journey of making things even better. Inspectors will always try to triangulate the information they have as far as is reasonable. You tend to think about it in this way: read it, hear it and see it from pupils and staff, from parents via the questionnaire, and from their own observations. Evidence always has to be firm. We call it secure, and it can't ever be hearsay. All of the judgments which are made in an inspection are made as a body of inspectors. It's a team judgment. There is never a moment when one inspector will be the sole contributor to that judgment. It will always be a team judgment. Even if the inspection team is small, it's always a team judgment. And I think that's quite an important thing to understand. So no one inspector is going to be rogue, because the team will work to get to a consensus of the judgment. In inspection, unsurprisingly, there will be meetings with staff and pupils and governors and senior leaders. This way of trying to triangulate what you've maybe read and seen, you're now going to hear it from the mouths of the people involved. You won't be surprised, I don't think, by the nature of the questions, particularly if you've read the framework and you've looked at A1 to 8 and P1 to 8. In fact, you can probably predict many of them based upon your knowledge or previous experience. So what we're going to do now is ask you to take some time out, because these meetings with those key people are really quite important. So we'd like you to take 10 minutes and think about the type of questions that, if you were a team inspector or a reporting inspector, that you would ask of the students and staff or the governors, but particularly think of students and staff. And we'd like you to think of 3 questions which are related to the regulatory standards, the things about safeguarding perhaps, and health and safety, curriculum, those things which are regulatory requirements. We'd like to think about 2 from the pupils' achievements, that's academic and otherwise, and 2 questions that you would think you might ask about around pupil development, the P1 to P8. So we're basically asking you to put yourself in the shoes of an inspector and think, if I had to ask questions of staff and pupils, if I had to think of 3 questions for regulations, what would they be? What 2 questions would I ask around the pupil achievement? And what 2 questions would I ask around pupil development? And if you have in front of you the A1 to 8 and P1 to 8, I think you might find that useful, and access to the 8 parts of the regulations. I'm going to give you 10 minutes to do that. And then, Robert, you're going to debrief us?
Will do, yes, will do.
Okay, thank you.
So we were asking you to think about the kind of questions a team might ask to your staff or to your pupils, or indeed to yourself. Joanne, Rob, you mentioned that you had done some initial training as a TI. Could I put you guys on the spot and ask you to perhaps offer some answers about regulatory questions? What kind of topics or areas or questions might you be expecting to be dealing with?
I'd want to know about the safeguarding policy, who's responsible for it, how that information is disseminated collectively to the team, who's responsible for maintenance of the buildings, estates, fire policies, fire procedures, announced drills, unannounced drills.
Yeah, you're absolutely on the right lines there. Yes, absolutely. And there's a whole host. And again, all those regulations are written down in the various documents, the CEF and various documents on the ISI website. So they're all there for you to see. They're open access, so you can go through them systematically. Anybody got anything on the achievement side, perhaps? Any thoughts on how you might ascertain with the pupil whether the numeracy or the literacy communication was as it should be, perhaps how it works across the curriculum?
I think I'd speak with the pupils, I'd do book looks, and I'd ask the pupils how they knew about the progress and the achievements that they were making.
That's it. Yeah, spot on, spot on.
It's her. She's good, isn't she?
Your turn next.
This is
all the Diet Coke.
I chose those guys because I thought they might have an opening gambit. But anybody, what about on the personal development side? Somebody else. What sort of things do you think an inspector might be looking to ask yourself or your pupils?
Who are you going to go to if you've got a concern?
Indeed, indeed.
And examples of that, if possible.
Yes, yes. And pupils do. Pupils are open. They just tell you absolutely straight. So you have to, we try and make these questions as open as possible, rather than, are you taught about this? You know, can you give me an example of, or can you show me where, or how would you know? They're brilliant questions with pupils particularly, and indeed with staff. And that's why you want them briefed. And I'll give you a little more detail about that very, very shortly. Paul, do you want to take it from there?
Yeah,
And,
I will. We'll pick it up and just try and summarise some of this. The inspection team will talk to staff about pupil achievement, pupil development. What will your staff say if you sat now and thought, what will they say now? Could they answer routine safeguarding questions in your school? And if you're honest about it and absolutely clear, you should have no problems if you're saying yes. If you're saying, I'm not sure, you need to ask the question, what I'm going to do about it. Have they had any training recently? That's safeguarding or other training, because again, that's something that would need to be emerging, particularly if it was related to other regulatory things other than safeguarding, health and safety, fire. Do they understand how to make lessons appropriate to all abilities? So this is around the achievement, and where are they on that? Is it just a small select group of staff who've got any notion of differentiation and nobody else bothers with it? Can they talk, I think I would say, staff knowledgeably about how that works? My experience is staff tend to be nervous talking to inspectors because they want to do the right thing. And really, it helps if you are briefing your staff all of the time around all of these areas, regardless of whether the inspection was coming. And I think it's one of those things, when you look at what we're doing in staff meetings, if it pertains to the framework and the standards that we have, I don't think you'll be going far wrong. And also call into question for your own selves, when it comes to the point of inspection, would it be better for your staff to have seen the SEF or parts of it, or not seen it at all? What you're thinking on that? And again, I think myself and Robert would offer no clear guidance. It's for you to decide for your school, but do think about that because it may make a difference. When the teams will speak to children about their work and their school life and experiences, you can't brief the children. And if you did, it would fail anyway because they are always dead straight. But essentially you can't brief them because you don't know who's going to be chosen. But if you've got everything right with the kids, they will easily extol the virtues of the school for you in a very honest way, which probably will make you blush. When you sense the inspector is getting in near, however, and again, you can't determine it absolutely, it's not an accurate science. But if you do say, actually, you know what's coming up in the next term, you can begin to think about key messages in year group assemblies or through form tutors. Keep dropping those key messages in throughout the year. And again, we've talked about it yesterday, having a program assemblies which keeps revisiting some of the key issues around bullying, for example, or safeguarding into your assembly program. So you have the program to show, and when the kids are being spoken to by the team inspectors, they can clearly communicate that this is a sequenced program, thoughtful program, which is there to benefit their personal development. Inspectors will speak to governors too. And again, I asked this question before, would it be a shock to your chair of governors to know that? Do they have a full picture? Sometimes governors are a little bit distant from the school. Do they have a full picture of the life of the school? Could your chair of governors answer key safeguarding questions? And when did one of them last check that the SCR had been audited? So there are responsibilities on the governors, which again, heads in schools need to make sure that their chair of governors particularly understands their responsibilities, because for sure, one of the roles of the inspection team is to make sure that they do. So how do they also offer governors, the chair of governors and the governing board, challenge to the head? Because that's part of the responsibilities that they have. And then just making sure that the governors aren't just sitting around having coffee every now and again, but they're actually fulfilling their legal responsibilities as governors. General reporting inspectors will select some staff and pupils at random for some of the meetings, and many reporting inspectors will let you select some staff and pupils for other meetings. And it sort of works as a bit of a hybrid. And the reasons for that, I think you get a deeper sense and things emerge during inspection, which needs further investigation. So you might call a meeting for another member of staff who can provide more information. In prep or primary schools, the inspection teams try to include staff from as wide a range of year groups as possible, plus any specialist. And also don't forget the role of teaching assistants, both in primary and secondary phase. They're really key members of staff who should be able to speak with confidence about the school and what it does.
So let's move on then to talk about what the actual meetings might be. So first of all, there's a discussion with staff, looking particularly at the implementation of those regulations. And if you look at the regulations and the 9 areas of regulatory inspection mentioned yesterday, you'll soon discern the questions are likely to include something about SMSC, British values, something about safeguarding, something on health and safety. And if your way of preparing your staff is to go over and over your safeguarding policy and over your health and safety policy, to be honest, that's no bad thing. And it brings out the importance of this aspect to the front of your staff members' minds. There'll be discussion with pupils, also looking at the regulations, and the same areas are covered, but obviously in a slightly more child-centred way. And what we're all hoping, as Paul mentioned earlier, is that the children's perception of their environment matches that of the staff, that which we've seen whilst we're on inspection activities, and that outlined in your SEF. And that's the triangulation he talked about a little bit earlier. Other meetings, excuse me a second. Discussion with staff looking at achievement and also the contributory factors, which will also include governance and leadership and management. We spent a lot of time yesterday going through the 8 achievement criteria. We'll want to find out from staff how they see those criteria and why they believe they are the way they are. In other words, if something's perceived to be good or excellent, then why is it so? And what factors are contributing to that judgment? One that they're often very reluctant to pull out, despite all the brilliant work you do, is leadership and management. We mentioned yesterday that writing initiative, for example. Well, that, if that's come from leadership, they won't recognise that, but the inspectors hopefully will. But you can help your staff here. There's the old acronym P: point, example, explain. Take them through that to keep them focused and ensure the inspectors have got relevant examples to back up the judgments. So you want them to make a point, you want to give, if they give a real life example and then talk it through the impact of it, that's really good stuff. There'll be discussion with pupils on achievement as well. We'll cover similar ground with them. You might, some inspectors even ask the children to bring an example of their work with them to talk through. Discussion with pupils on personal development. And again, everything we mentioned there on achievement will be the same with the personal development criteria. We'll want some background on how things look from the pupil's perspective and why. We don't ask generic questions here because every school is different. And we can also tailor the questions if we need to pursue a particular thread that needs further investigation. And why that might be, I'll allude to in just a moment. There'll be discussion with staff on pupils' personal development, again, which is the same as above. So look at the inspection framework and the criteria on which you're being judged, and that should give you your food for thought in terms of trying to work out what areas you could be asked about. Now, for those of you with boarders, there'll also be questions for both staff and pupils on what boarding adds to their personal development particularly. And that's a big one, because in the reports, we're asked to bring out what contribution the boarding makes to the life of the school.
Okay, Robert, thank you. And in the search for this evidence throughout the inspection process, one piece here which I think has an important part to play in all of the A1 to 8 and P1 to 8 is the work scrutiny. Inspectors will be provided with work in all subjects of 3 pupils in each of the year groups selected. So it wouldn't include year 2, year 6, year 9, 11 or 13, as they don't normally take books away from the key examination groups. But there will be a selection, usually 3 year groups, and they'll want you to choose 3 pupils, generally from within the context of the school, who would be deemed to be higher, lower and average attainers. And all those books need to be collected and delivered to the appropriate room, whether it's the team base or whether it's a separate room for the work scrutiny. And the inspectors will take their time to do a really thorough job at seeking out the evidence that is giving them. Going back to thinking about the pupils, it's really incumbent upon you as a school to think about including pupils with special educational needs or disabilities, pupils for whom English is additional language, pupils identified to be within the most able group in their cohort, or pupils who have produced work which is particularly distinctive, for example, pieces of individual research. Now, again, part of that might be discussion with the reporting inspector, but if you can say, right, I've included SEND pupil, we've got also a pupil here who's EAL, the reporting inspector will probably thank you for that. Or the reporting inspector may take the decision that they're going to randomly select whose work they're going to see. But that's part of that initial discussion on the telephone call. And of course, and I would presume that many of you already do this, consider getting your staff to do work scrutinies or book looks as they're called. Do it for a year group or do it in subject department meetings in secondary phase is very effective. And I have seen many of those done, and the staff development that goes on as a result of those is huge. But it's also good stuff as well to gather together as part of the SEF, and it helps you know where your school is so that there shouldn't be any shocks or surprises at all. So if they're doing that sort of book look, you would ask them to be looking at the standards of attainment that they're seeing across the children, and it would be sensible for them not to have their own class, I would argue. Progression. What's their rate of progress? Are they making rapid progress or just satisfactory progress? Differentiation, examples of differentiation that they're seeing. And do keep your minds as well when you're doing those book looks. Get your staff to keep their minds very clearly on the top, middle, bottom performers, the AL, the SEND, etc. But also get them to think about what are the contributory factors to what they're seeing. What's leading the progression to be rapid? The standards of attainment are very high. Why is that? Well, they came in very high, or they came in moderate, but during this year they've had these experiences because this has been funded, this has been a drive on the school. So encouraging the staff to think about contributory factors, what's contributing to the students making rapid progress. Think also about the marking of work in the books that you look at. Questions like, is it formative? Is it genuinely helpful? Does that marking lead to improvements of the pupil's knowledge, understanding and skills? Or is it just a set of ticks? What does it do to create the relationship between the teacher and pupil, that sense of mutual respect and trust? And what impact does that have on the motivation for keeping pupils working? So really take the look at marking in that way. It's more broad than just, oh, it's formative marking, it's done. There's other things that are happening with it. And again, getting your staff to focus on that and reflect on it in an honest way is a very useful thing to do. And finally, on that marking, get your staff to moderate their own use of adherence to the marking policy. It is really an interesting exercise to do, because still in schools will have a wonderful marking policy. Some colleagues follow it to the letter, some colleagues don't, just do what they want to do. What's happening in your school, and can teachers reflect on their marking and improve it and improve it across the board? Please be aware that if staff do not follow key academic policies in general terms, that's, for example, whole school marking policies, it is most likely to have a detrimental impact on the evidence gathered. So if you see a school that's got a marking policy, which is an academic policy, which has never been followed, that might be one of the reasons why the standard of literacy is low in the school, and it's a contributory factor to a poor performance. So just be careful to be sure that if you've got a policy, your staff follow it. If they don't, it's having a detrimental impact on the evidence base that's being gathered. And the consequence of that is it's likely to have a detrimental impact on the judgment that the team arrive at. Robert.
Yep. So the other area I want to talk about today that can make or break your grade is the surveys. Teams will survey your parents, your pupils and your staff. Now, you can avoid surprises here by doing the occasional survey yourself, perhaps probably the year before inspection, to understand the climate and any issues the parents are raising and get those rectified in advance. However, do be careful, because there is such a thing as questionnaire fatigue. And if you keep asking the same questions to the same people, they're going to get fed up of it and not respond. You've also got to make sure that if they do respond, you do something with those views expressed. And inspectors will look at those surveys and will pick up on any main themes, good or bad. They will, of course, discuss them with the head. Now, as an example, here's the sort of reports that we as inspectors are given by ISI once the questionnaires have closed. And we would analyse this and then come back to talk to the head. Now, we can't divulge to you which parents say what, but we can say if, for example, there was a cluster of discontent in year 8 on a particular issue, or that Key Stage 1 parents liked this aspect of your work, but Key Stage 2 parents didn't. And if you know your school, you'll have all the reasons why at your fingertips, and you'll be able to show us the evidence trail of what you've done about a particular issue. As the RI on one compliance inspection last year, I seem to be looking at some major bullying incidents in one year 4 group. The head took me straight to the bullying log, showed me what the parents had said and how it had been dealt with, and it was obvious it had been dealt with. So I was immediately satisfied and didn't need to take any further action or worry about it anymore. Those parents were just having a dig. Don't panic about this sort of thing. Every school gets someone who says there's bullying, someone who complains about the food or the car parking. You're going to get some negative responses, and a lone respondent won't wield much influence, especially if there's a strong body of opinion who counter that view. However, if there's a groundswell of griping, then obviously we might need to discuss it further, and that might be some of those additional questions that get asked in the interviews. So look at the image on screen there. We haven't got too much time left, but take a moment to read through some of those figures as best you can. Help me out here. I'm going to go see the head, and here's the report. What are the top 3 highlights, and what are the 3 issues that I'm going to highlight with the head as possible weaknesses or areas for development? Just have a quick scan through now and see if you can identify anything fairly quick. Feel free to share that with us all.
Did you want us to share thoughts now?
Yeah, yes, do, yeah.
So obviously, there would be some looking into the number 12, the bullying, because there's quite a lot disagreeing down there, 26% in total disagreeing or strongly disagreeing. I think they might also be interested to look a bit more at the pupil views, because although that's not desperately low, there's more of a spread there, and that maybe looks interesting. I think they might hone in on that slightly. And then in terms of positives, I think they would be saying that the communication comes out as being good, communicating routines and policies, and that it was about trip supervision and general supervision as well was a bit of a strength. Yeah,
well done, Alanda, off the top of your head, and that's pretty rapid scanning there. Yeah, we can see how many agree and disagree with each statement, and the second to last column shows the average response, where the lower the number, the more favourable the response. So if you look at anything that starts with the 1, it's pretty strongly agreeing. So parents, as you say, were pleased with number 1 about the curriculum, and there were no dissenting answers at all there. The same was true about number 4 and 5, that's teaching and development of skills. And there were lots of other good areas too, scoring an average of 1.4. I always look carefully at the safeguarding, number 10, and with that one, just one parent disagreed with that, so that's always encouraging, isn't it? On areas possibly needing improvement, as Alanda said, number 12, bullying has a rather high profile relative to the others, with 27% of respondents suggesting the school needs to improve this. We've got numbers 18 and 19 about complaints and leadership, also raising a few questions there. Always great having to go to talk to a head with his complaints about the leadership. This school was able to show me the bullying log, and all 6 complaints actually in this school were about the same issue, which was fascinating. So you can get this little groundswell, this little microcosm, and partly interpreting the statistics is dealing with that, and that had been resolved. And it really helps if you've got logs of incidents or previous parental survey figures that show, for example, when we did our last survey, 98% of parents thought the level of homework was just right, or that almost everyone felt their child was well looked after in school. And again, we come back to that point, be prepared. If there's anything that catches you by surprise, then maybe you aren't really as expert as you think you are. Do the work in good time so you can rectify any issues coming out. On the pupil side, things work in a very similar way. Again, just take a couple of seconds to look through that one. Think about the top highlights and lowlights. Is there anything you want to share there?
There's an interesting oxymoron there, isn't there? It says on number 10, they're all quite confident that the school keeps them safe, and yet they don't know what to do if they're ill or injured and don't feel that they get prompt help.
It is, yeah. And the younger the children you're surveying, the more likely you get inconsistencies with the results, for the simple reason, by the time you get down to year 4, year 3, they don't actually understand what the heck the question means. So whilst we wouldn't want a teacher walking around the computer room pointing out the answers to them that they're supposed to give, sometimes in my own school, for example, we did we took a class into the computer room to do this questionnaire, and say the teacher didn't give them any answers, but they did say, so let's all do question 14 together now. Here's what it says. Here's what it actually means. And so again, without wishing to manipulate the results, you can aid your own cause by making sure that the pupils actually know what they're answering. And as you say, number 10, safety, and number 12, behaviour. We've got number 16 and number 19 running close behind. So what message is this sending to me as an inspector? Probably a safe and well-ordered school, perhaps, as far as the kids are concerned. On the other side of the coin, there are some answers with an average of 1.9. Area 8, favouritism, often comes up, possibly due to the way that children perceive the way they're treated rather than their actual treatment, but it will be something that teams would probe when in lesson observations and when in discussions with pupils. And of course, you can interpret statistics in so many ways. On question 17, the medical help one, 20% agreed. And that sounds significant. Sorry, disagreed, but that sounds, that's only 11 pupils. And the other side of the coin is 80% are actually really happy. And an average of 1.9 is agree. So we don't know what their understanding of the word prompt actually is, perhaps. And again, this will be pursued in discussion with staff and pupils to see if we could find any patterns. And we'd also watch at playtime to see what supervision actually looked like. So these are pointers which we discuss with you as a management team. And say teams might revisit and pursue some of those areas in more depth, depending on what they hear. And this can be either in search of excellent examples or to probe something that's a bit more concerning that might lead to a weaker outcome, but don't necessarily worry about it if they do. And at the end of the day, as we said already, inspection teams weigh up what they've seen in writing, what they've heard and seen in class, what they've seen in the corridors, what they've heard from staff and pupils and parents to check if it all adds up to meet that grade. So inspection activities on an EQI finish on lunchtime of day 3. That's usually the Thursday. And the team consider the judgments prior to final feedback. They can only make judgments on the evidence they've gathered. So your job is to make sure you've pointed them to all the evidence that they need, as we mentioned throughout this session and throughout yesterday's. Paul.
So when we gathered all together, what would excellent look like? And it's really interesting reading through a selection of recent educational quality reports where excellent grades have been awarded. That reveals some common patterns, which may be interesting to look at. The use of the grade descriptors is clear through the range of examples shown, are as diverse as the schools that make up the independent sector. Here are the range of aspect judgments, though I have mainly not included supporting examples so that you can't identify the school, of course. So for A1, we see references to attainment, We see references to progress and to the various subgroups we've already discussed at some length. For A2, here are references to relative progress across the curriculum, and there's a mention of the school's aims also. In A3, there's another reference to pupils with SEND and how pupils can enhance their oral skills. There was another sentence about reading and writing in the report too. With numeracy and IT, we see the references about applying their skills across the curriculum. In achievements, there is a comprehensive list of how pupils are involved beyond the classroom curriculum. And then in attitudes, there's a description of what inspectors saw from the pupils. Do you see how the sentence in the report relate to the grade criteria and to the description from A1 to 8 that we discussed yesterday? In the development side, a P7 extract shows how the questionnaires are used. In P6, we have a list of pupils, of how pupils can make a contribution, and the aims are mentioned again. The collaboration statements are self-explanatory, we think. And on P8, the statements are again self-explanatory, with the questionnaire again cited and the school's aims once again referenced. Your role in planning for an inspection is actually just to ensure that the pupils have all of these opportunities that they need in your school to meet the criteria which come from the framework which is laid out and agreed by DFE as something which provides the sort of education that our children should have. Okay, Robert?
Yep. So you've taken on board a huge amount of information over the last couple of days. One last quiz to check whether you've actually been listening. So once again, I've put the link into the chat. And on there is a QR code should you wish to scan that with your phone. 2 minutes, please, and then we'll go over the questions really quickly just to check how you understood what we talked about. Let's move forward then. So to go over the questions, the grade descriptors are a best fits, like we said. You don't need to match absolutely every statement to be successful. On assessment stuff, you might choose to put your assessment data in a variety of places, but please do ensure that your end of year summative data and any ability ranking scores and that kind of thing are definitely on the ISI data portal. And if you haven't already got that up there, go and do it as soon as you leave us today, please. On number 3, on the initial phone call, the RI is sorting out regulatory and logistical issues, so they'll seek your assurance that the questionnaire has gone out to parents and will offer you the chance to make any minor tweaks to your regulatory policies. They'll not ask staff any financial information, but they will ask about safeguarding, and they will ask about pupil involvement in the various school bodies that might be available. Which one of these will they ask about? They will not ask. They will ask about the school council. They will not ask anything financial. They won't ask anything that incriminates or intimidates particular teachers. Okay. When supplying books on the work scrutiny, always offer the prescribed range and try to work in examples of the categories we mentioned, such as SEND, EL, you're more able, and so on. And hopefully, yes, you all got the last one right. Well done. If you got 8 points, well done. And I'm sure you can look forward with confidence to your next inspection. If you got less than 6, which nobody did, then I was going to say you can rewatch these videos, which we'll put out to you a little later on, along with the slides. And we're hoping to rerun the course after Christmas. So get some more of your staff to come on board with that and check us out again. And at the end of the day, we're doing all this to give our pupils the best education and the best experiences. Now, for me, to conclude, excellence is all about knowing what to expect, then diagnosing your current performance to help you meet the grade descriptors. It's all in the preparation. It's about how you embrace the process and your willingness to improve. And if you've done all that background work and thought about it logically and gone through it in good time so you can make some changes, you're likely to be all right. Paul?
I would just add a couple more things. The whole inspection process is here to ensure that pupils get at least the minimum legal requirements in terms of access to an appropriate curriculum and to ensure that their safety and their health and well-being are protected, and that the leadership management of the school can at least deliver properly on these key regulatory areas. But inspection's also here to support and encourage schools to seek to continue to improve themselves in terms of the quality of education that their pupils receive, both in the academic and other achievements and in their personal development. I think excellence in inspection is about understanding processes and procedures and the framework well, and then ensuring that the school is constantly self-evaluating itself, using the staff and the pupils and the parents and the governing body, all to that effect. An excellent school is always responding to the needs of the school in its own setting, both regionally and nationally, and is always driven by the best interests of its pupils. An excellent school is a place that is constantly striving to improve the outcomes in all the definitions for the pupils. It's our hope today, and we trust that you share our hope, that all of the schools in the sector will operate at the highest level, i.e. that they are judged excellent against the framework. It is by dint of the fact that there is a framework that it's possible for all the schools in the sector to reach that excellent level. To do so, they must understand the inspection framework and undertake the process of school evaluation and school development in an accurate and determined manner, working always to improve the outcomes for their pupils and constantly seeking to deliver the best education in all of its many guises. We would suggest that your young people deserve nothing less.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So a summary there of what we just said. And if you want to ask us any further questions at any stage or get in touch with us, some contact details there, some channels of communication that you can use. Kind of on behalf of both Paul and myself, can I say thank you for joining us. We hope you found it useful. We'll get the slides out and some recordings to those of you that need those. And hopefully we can see you again at some stage in the future. But thank you very much indeed for joining us.